You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandak. Featured columnist Jay Billstein is with me today on CYInterview. We are here to celebrate a milestone. Attorney Gloria Allred just celebrated her 80th birthday on July 3rd. For 14 years, she has joined us on CYInterview to speak about a variety of topics, and she's here to talk about that today and many other topics. Happy belated birthday, Attorney Allred. How are you?
Well, fine, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, Chris, and you're very sweet to remember my birthday.
Oh, we of course, Attorney Allred. So what does it mean to turn 80?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't really have any more meaning than the day before, except that I still feel a lot of energy. I actually, if people didn't tell me that I was 80 or remember the date on the calendar, I would think I was just 14 because I feel that way. I feel, that it's exciting to be alive, so many adventures ahead. I'm working nonstop every day, every weekend, every night, every holiday, and I feel very blessed that I'm able to help so many people, rape victims, sexual assault victims, child sexual abuse, victims of sexual harassment, victims of discrimination because of their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, their condition of AIDS. It's just great to be alive. That's all I can say.
Oh, I think that's a phenomenal way to look at it. So this past week, you had a surprise for your birthday when you were joined at a press conference by Texas high school valedictorian Paxton Smith, who spoke up for women's rights during her high school graduation speech back in June.
Right.
How did you meet Paxton, and how did this come together?
Yes, Paxton is the Texas high school valedictorian who had written a proposed speech to give at our Texas public high school graduation, and it had been approved by the authorities there. But when she got up to give the speech, instead of giving that speech, she, I believe, tore up the approved speech and instead pulled out another speech that she had written that she really wanted to give, and that was in support of pro-choice, in support of a woman's legal right to choose available, affordable, legal abortion. And so that's what she did, and it stunned a lot of people there. It stunned people. It got coverage all over the world, I think, because of her courage in speaking out so strongly in support of choice and against Texas laws, which were recently passed, which severely restrict a woman's right to abortion, essentially saying that you can't get one, with rare exceptions, after 6 weeks of pregnancy, and many women don't even know they're pregnant at that time. So that's my admiration was just so enormous for her, and I was going to tweet her, I was going to do something in support, and then I thought, I'm sure she's going to get tweets from all over the world, people emailing her, this is not the time to get in touch. And then Hillary Clinton tweeted her in support, and she was just, in a firestorm of people trying to contact her. And so in any event, then about, I guess, maybe a week or two later, someone I know contacted me, and she publishes books, and she said that she had signed a deal with Paxton and this 18-year-old about, the war on women, the war on choice, and she wanted to know if I would do a chapter, doing personal stories. I said, yes, of course I'll do a chapter on that subject. And I said, and then I told her a story about how I wanted to support Paxton, and, I just think the world of her, and I would love her to come and be a guest on my birthday if she could be in Los Angeles. And this woman, her name is Sequoia, said, I'll call her. And she hung up the phone and called her, and Paxton immediately said yes. So that's what happened. She flew to Los Angeles last Thursday. We had a little press conference on Friday. She is someone that, I'm looking forward to working with in the future. She's very representative of the younger generation, understanding that they probably have more at stake than anyone else does. But if she may testify with me potentially in the future, we may do other things together in addition to the book. But I'm just really looking forward to working with her because now, having spent several days with her, she went to, 3 of my birthday celebrations because a number of people hosted celebrations for me. And she is everything that you saw as she gave her speech, that and more. She's very committed to choice. She's very confident. She's very bright. She understands, what's involved. And let's see, today is the day when she started orientation. She's going to begin college at the University of Texas in Austin. So I'm just thrilled to have met her.
Great birthday present and well-deserved for the big 8-0. So, as the attorney that has represented 33 of Bill Cosby's accusers, what was the last week like for you? And what did you tell your clients regarding the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision?
Well, it was a firestorm, suddenly, like a lightning strike, too, in many ways. I was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, the news came through. And I knew that it would be devastating for my clients, and I talked to some of them, and certainly it was. However, there's bad news, there's good news. The good news is, I represented the majority of the prior bad act accusers who testified at both of those criminal trials of Mr. Cosby. In the second one, of course, he was convicted of 3 felonies, indecent sexual assault of Andrea Constant, and sentenced. So, the good news is they had the courage to testify, and a jury of his peers convicted him unanimously of those felonies. That will always be on Mr. Cosby's, that'll be part of his legacy. And so when he passes from this world, his obituary is going to say that he was convicted of these 3 felonies by a jury of his peers, and that the Supreme Court vacated the conviction essentially on procedural grounds. And that had to do with the first DA supposedly entering into an agreement not to prosecute. By the way, the agreement was never in writing. And then Mr. Cosby, supposedly because he thought that he wasn't going to be criminally prosecuted, he then had to give his deposition, meaning his testimony under oath, to Andrea Constant, the victim, who was suing him. And he couldn't say, I'll take the Fifth Amendment and invoke my privilege against self-incrimination, because he wasn't going to be prosecuted. So therefore he had to give truthful answers. And he did give some answers that were incriminating, and even the Pennsylvania Supreme Court called them incriminating. And those statements that he made under oath in that deposition were then used in the criminal case, admitted, and used against him. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said, wait a minute, I'm paraphrasing, that's a violation of due process. If a prosecutor promises not to prosecute, and then the defendant who is not going to be prosecuted then relies on that to his detriment, meaning he gives truthful answers instead of claiming the Fifth in a civil case, then the promise has to be enforced and there can't be a prosecution. That's what happened. It would be a violation of due process. So what I'm telling my clients in the world is this is not a decision on the merits. In other words, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not decide that they believe women or they didn't believe women, that women matter or they don't matter. It was strictly on the procedure that was followed. Now comes the next step, and I've been saying Mr. Cosby may be home, but he's not home free. And the reason I say that is because I have a civil lawsuit, Chris, pending against him in Santa Monica, California, on behalf of Judy Haas, who alleges in her lawsuit that she was 15 years old when she was victimized by Bill Cosby at the Playboy Mansion in Southern California, that she became the victim of child sexual abuse by Mr. Cosby. And so now, let's fast forward to that case and how that's affected by the Supreme Court case in Pennsylvania and that decision. We are going back to court next month in our civil case in Santa Monica. And we're going to ask that there be a date set for Mr. Cosby to give his deposition in our case. And he is going to have to answer those questions under oath, even though he did give one deposition to us many years ago when we litigated it, and that's under seal, so I can't tell you what he said or didn't say. But based on that, what happened is we went back to court and we said, Your Honor, we ask you to order him and compel him to give another deposition, a second deposition. And, of course, Cosby's lawyers objected, but the court said he agreed with us, and we prevailed, and the court said, yes, you must give a second deposition. Now, the court then said, however, but I'm staying my order, meaning you don't have to give it until the criminal case in Pennsylvania is concluded. So we've been waiting for that. Now it's concluded, we can take his deposition under oath, and he's going to have to answer all questions. And just like in the Andrea Constant civil case, he's not going to be taken. He can't take the Fifth Amendment. He can't invoke his privilege against self-incrimination. He will have to answer all questions. I'm looking forward to that. I doubt that he is.
Jay? Gloria, first of all, happy birthday, and we're so happy to have you here. I'm really happy to be speaking with you. You're very welcome. Sticking on this area to dig in a little more,
sure.
If you were representing a client, if you were a defense attorney, if you could put yourself in those shoes for a moment, and a prosecutor said, well, I'm going to agree not to prosecute you for whatever reason, wouldn't you ask for that in writing?
If I were representing a defendant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
So doesn't this somehow strike you? I mean, look, I know when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, but can I make a little bit of an assumption that somebody of Mr. Cosby's stature and wealth had some kind of effective counsel? I mean, he didn't have somebody who got their law degree off the back of a matchbook.
Well,
something seems strange here.
Well,
why wasn't there a document? I don't get this.
It was a document, but it wasn't an agreement document. It was a press release that Bruce Castor, that first DA, put out. And it was really unclear, and in fact, as to any agreement, and even as to whether there was, agreement never to prosecute him. And in fact, there was a lot of argument about that very issue that you raised in courts below, and some courts below found there was no such agreement. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, of course, is the last word, has it for cases in Pennsylvania, and that is they decided differently. So, and by the way, the attorney who represented him at the time is no longer alive. But I would say yes, in a way, it's legal malpractice. Because, I mean, Cosby could sue him and say, look, there was an agreement. Why did you tell me, if he did, that there was nothing in writing, and I have to answer all the questions in the civil case. Why didn't you tell me I couldn't get it in writing, and therefore we can't be sure, so don't answer these questions?
So that being said, Gloria, is it possible here that there was legal malpractice, but at the same time, perhaps the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania came down with a bad decision? I mean, maybe the way to look at this is, Cosby's attorney didn't do what he should have, but at the same time,
I don't know. I wouldn't call it a bad decision. I mean, it's a decision. There's a strong argument for it, but there's also a strong argument against it. So that's the way I look at it. I read it, and if I were on the court, would I have found what they found? Absolutely not. But I'm not on the court, and that's the way it is.
Got you.
He can't be prosecuted, and if the attorney is no longer alive, so there's not going to be any malpractice case. But
understood.
Look, the good news is, as far as many victims are concerned, he did serve roughly 2.5 years, a little more of the prison sentence, which was 3 to 10 years. So it's not like he got away scot-free.
Well, and he's no longer America's dad, and his entire legacy was basically, it wasn't erased, but his legacy changed from night to day, though. No, I mean, he
absolutely,
was...
and you're right about that, and there are many people in Hollywood who are not going to, they want to stay as far away from him as they can. They don't want to have him, be on a comedy show on television again. I never thought he was very funny in the first place. But, there are rumors he'd like to have a comedy show. I think most people are going to not want to deal with him and not help him in that way in the entertainment industry. So we'll see what's next for Mr. Cosby. But when he's looking at what's next, he needs to think about the fact that I'm next. I'm next very soon. And I'm sure that's not going to be. Yeah,
that's not a place that I think anybody would want to be. I thought this entire thing was strange. I'm all for due process, and if there really was an agreement not to prosecute, that should be honored. But then I scratched my head and said, what kind of attorney wouldn't get that in writing? Just seems so odd. But I think you covered that. I think you covered that. I think you covered that well. Let me move on quickly to.
And by the way, Andrea Constant's attorney said they never were part of any deal. They never had even heard of such a deal. That's the victim's attorney. You would think she'd know.
Yeah, I would think that. I don't use the term a woman's right to choose. I use a far more all-encompassing term called body sovereignty. I, for a whole host of reasons, don't believe that the government should be in the business of telling any of us, men or women, what takes place beneath our skin, period. Do you think in any way that goes too far? I don't want the government deciding for women anything to do with pregnancy, period. I think that any regulation dealing with, at this point, in this trimester, second trimester, third trimester, isn't this really an issue to be completely decided between a woman and her doctor, period, without any governmental interference whatsoever?
I mean, again, there's a strong argument for what you're saying. But what the court's done has been balancing interests. And, saying if Roe v. Wade, the 1973 U.S. Supreme Court decision, essentially established a trimester approach, that, the government cannot completely ban, outlaw abortion in the first trimester. But in the second trimester, they can regulate, although they can't ban the abortion. In the third trimester, they can regulate and they can ban. Essentially, that, is the decision. But that was a better decision than where that was when they took up the case. When they took up the case, there were many states that made abortion a crime. And women couldn't get an abortion legally. And so they had to get unsafe back alley abortions, and many of them died as a result or were maimed. So the decision was better than where we were, but from your point of view, not as good as it should be. Now here we are, all these years later, and now there are more than 20 states that want to restrict abortion. And
yes, I know.
Very
horrendous.
So
horrendous.
We'll have to see what happens when the Supreme Court takes up the Mississippi case next year.
Was Roe decided, maybe my memory's faulty on this, but wasn't a large part of it dealing with the right to privacy?
I think there was a discussion of right to privacy, liberty interests, and, but now we have a new United States, newly constituted U.S. Supreme Court. And, we have 3 Trump appointees on the court, and very conservative. And so, there is this precedent which should not be overturned. It shouldn't be eroded. It shouldn't be cut, restricted.
Should be fortified.
We're very concerned about what they will decide when they decide the Mississippi case. Probably be orally argued later this year and then decided next June. We'll have to see.
Let's take a quick turn to finish up to something personal. You look phenomenal. I remember at one point, I don't recall why, so please forgive me, that you fasted. You were on a fast for a certain number of days for an hour. Is that something besides for an issue that you do in your personal life? Do you fast? Do you eat a whole food plant-based diet? Are you careful with your food? Do you have an exercise regimen? Because, and I don't mean to be superficial here, but you know, you're obviously in phenomenal shape, and that doesn't just happen by itself. Is there anything that you do in specific in the Gloria Allred universe? Is there a certain kind of regimen that you have dedicated to keep on keeping on?
Well, some of the above of what you just asked about. Not all. Well, I don't eat meat. I haven't eaten any kind of meat, which means fowl, white meat, or meat for decades. So no meat at all. I do eat fish and lots of vegetables and fruit. I don't drink alcohol at all, and I've never smoked weed or regular cigarettes, and I've never done, and I don't do drugs, and I never have, which is not a moral decision. It's just when the drug craze started, I was working 3 jobs. I never had any money to spend on drugs. I was a single parent raising a child.
That's funny.
I didn't have any time to go to parties. You know, I had to save everything to support my daughter as a single parent who couldn't get child support a lot of times. So in that way, sometimes not having money turns out to be a good thing. So, although I don't necessarily wish it on anybody. So that's pretty much, I do some little workout, an elliptical 10 minutes every morning. But, you know, that's not enough. I should do more, but I don't. So there's more I could do. I know I should do, but at least it's something.
Are you someone who gets on a scale every day and says, "Up, I'm up a pound. Got to cut back on this or that"? Or
I don't do that. But recently, I did get on some doctor's scales, and I said, "There's something wrong with these scales. I'm heavier than I usually am." And it turns out there was nothing wrong with the scale. I'm just heavier than I usually am. That's all. Can't blame it on the scales. I tried, didn't work, because the truth came to me when I got on somebody else's scale, and it was the same. So, sometimes you just have to face yourself and say you need to go back to having a little more discipline of what you eat. That's all.
But whatever you're doing doesn't seem to be working. It is working, and happy 80th.
Say, I try to. People say, "Do you exercise?" And I say, "I exercise my mouth by talking a lot." But my daughter said, "Mom, that does not count as exercise." So.
Yeah. Well, there's someone we just discussed before that's going to rue the day that you're so well exercised when it comes to your verbal prowess. So there we go. But have a happy birthday month, and we're so pleased that you could join us once again.
Well,
and by the way,
Okay.
I don't think we talked since Donald Trump was defeated and out of office.
Boy, what a happy day that was.
Yeah, no fooling.
Yeah, but I got a lot of cases coming up. Harvey Weinstein's going to be extradited this month to Los Angeles. I represent 2 victims in the criminal case in Los Angeles, in which he will be tried most likely later this year. And he'll be arraigned in July when he comes back. And, I represent 20 victims of Jeffrey Epstein and also victims or alleged victims of R. Kelly, and that case is going to start, a criminal case in New York in August. So there's a lot coming up, and I'll look forward to coming back.
You've got a full card. It sounds like you've never been busier.
I'm always busy. But, I get up every morning, and I just can't wait to go and slay those dragons and get the bad guys. So, I always say that fighting injustice is very good for the health. I don't need coffee. I wake up and I say, "What? He's doing what?" And I'm off and running, and I still have so many people, contacting me, seeking representation, seeking my help, to represent them to win justice, and I just thank God. I feel blessed that I'm in a position to help so many people, victims, and I'm just going to keep doing so until the very last day, and if possible, from the great beyond, if there is one.
Well, God bless you. I'll say two things. One is
Go ahead.
Well, one thing I miss very much with you is the old days of Larry King, because that was always, when you used to be on Larry King, I personally enjoyed that so much. And
well,
of course,
thank you so much.
He's gone now.
I don't want to be with Larry King
enough.
right now, for one thing.
Yeah, well, that I know.
He's no longer alive, so I'd like to avoid
that. I know, but yes, that's to be avoided. And of course, I very much enjoyed when Trump was trying to get through his last appointee to the court, and you quoted Mother Jones and said, "What are you going to do, Gloria?" And you said, "I think the quote is, I'm going to pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living." So
thank you for remembering. That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, and you certainly do that. So well said by you, and happy, and again, so happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you again very soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Attorney Allred.
Sure.
So for Powerhouse Attorney Gloria Allred, featured columnist Jay Billstein, and CY Interview, I'm Chris Shan.